Hey folks, how are you doing? Hopefully you're enjoying your Easter holidays. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do part 2 of the Uphostery stool. I'll talk about the stool in a wee second, but I want to recap what we've done already. But we're moving on to part 2, which will be the 2-inch foaming stage. Now there's a couple of wee things you've got to be mindful when we're doing the foaming stage, and that's what we've got to do with measurements and chamfering the foam to stop bundling up, stop the foam from massing. So what we do first is I'm going to talk about the things we're going to need, which you'll be able to get once you get into college. So further ado, you'll need a metre stick, okay, measured one, a square, the cloth tape, and we're going to work with centimetres, type 71 staples, 10 mils. 10 mils actual depth, the actual drive in. You do get different depths. You go from around 4 mil up to about 12 or around there. Okay, type 71 staple gun. And remember, when we're feeding the staples in, what we do is the wee plastic lever at the back, we just release that, it brings it forward. You can drop that out and drop a new line of staples in. When you drop the staples in, it's the two sharp ends to the top, okay? Point towards where it actually fires them in. Close it over. Make sure that goes over. Oh, we've got a wee jam, yeah? The hose from the side of the racking, which you'll get when you're in college. Very sharp shears, scissors. Your steel tape, a Sharpie, pencil just to write some notes down, some of your spray glue, and we're playing this at college. Always make sure before you spray glue that you pick any sort of wee bits of gunk here from the actual spray nozzle. If you don't, what happens, it will spray off in all different angles and you'll end up spraying somebody and they'll not be too happy. Their best tweeds are covered in spray glue. If you do get glue on you, silicone takes glue off, so all you do is get some can of silicone, spray it onto a cloth and it'll wipe it off, no problem. So always be wary, it can go anywhere if you're not careful. Okay. And the 2-inch foam, or 50 millimeters or 5 centimeters as it's called, 2-inch foam. Okay. Alright guys, just to recap on what we did in part 1 of the stool. If you remember rightly, looking in it underneath, you can just see in the video that the first thing we put on was the spring clips. These spring clips hold on the serpentine springs, these things here. And we put 5 of them on, and then what we did was we tied 3 lines of twine equal distances to stabilise the spring to come and make it a spring unit. That knot we used was a clove hitch knot. Okay, so we used clove hitch knots all the way along and ended up with stapling the bit of string onto the frame. We started stapling at the beginning and then stapled at the end. From there, what we did is we covered it a bit of hessian, but first of all what we did was we measured it and we added 100 millimetres onto either side of the length and 100 millimetres on either side to the width. Okay, and then what we did is we got coil fibre and we did a rolled edge to firm up and harden the edge and give it a bit of give instead of sitting straight onto the wood. So it means if you sat on top of the stool on the edge, then it's going to be firm, but it's going to be soft also. It's not going to be hard timber edge, because what happens, you can cut through your foam if you leave a wooden edge. Okay, especially a sharp wooden edge. Then from there we measured the inside size and we fitted the first layer of foam. Now this foam, we're going to use a baby blue one, which is a really soft one, but you get different grades of foam which you can have a wee look at. Glover Brothers do a good thing illustration on their website, so you can go into there and have a good look at all the different foams and where they're for, whether it's for trade or it's for seating or back or arm, all the different stuff you can use to build up layers for modern upholstery. Remember, folks, this is modern. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is the foam. So first thing I'm going to do is measure this bit of foam. We're going to go over the top of this bit of foam and also the rolled edge, so it's going to connect onto the edge here. Okay. What we've got is I've done a wee example bit of cut of foam before I show you, and as you can see it's got a chamfer on it, right? So that's for a particular reason. If I didn't chamfer it, what would happen is it'd start to bulge. So if I'm bringing a bit of foam over like that, and twisted over the edge, right here it starts to bulge, and the likelihood is the pressure, the compressing the foam will just pop all your staples and everything else. So we're going to put a chamfer on, and that chamfer just allows the piece of foam to go over and staple straight onto your actual frame. So first thing I did is we want to measure 1 centimetre down for the top of the actual stool timber bit, and make a marking all the way round. So you'll need your metre stick for this. And what we're going to do is I'll just measure 1 centimetre down, mark it, 1 centimetre down, mark it, get your steel rule and then draw it right along. I've been ahead of the game, I've done it in pencil so I can see where I'm going. So you've got that sort of line all the way around the actual piece, like that. Okay, so I'll just continue that all the way around. So you've got that pencil line, and that's where you fold the foam over to and where it should stop. You don't want it to go beyond that. If you do go beyond that line, what you do is just get one of the Stanley knives, one of the sharp utility knives, and cut it to that line. And that will stop it interfering with your border once you go to attach your border later on. We got off it. Okay, so that's me got that line all the way around, ready to go from a bit of foam. So what will happen is once we cut a bit of foam over size, so what we do is we measure from the front of the actual rolled edge, the width and the length, and then what we do is we add 5 centimetres on to each side to give an overall size, but I'll explain that in a second. Then we chamfer a bit of foam, and what happens, that glues onto there like that. We glue this side, we glue there, and then we bring that round, and then that staples down onto that pencil line or pen line, the Sharpie. Okay, so first I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the stool. Now we know it's 600 by 4, whatever. Remember in stage 1 I said just slightly hang over this edge of the rolled edge, just slightly, so just probably about 5 mil, half a centimetre. So just remeasure that, get the right size, and it actually works out at 630, so you're just going to write 630 on there. Okay, and the width, so that's an extra 15 mil, that's how overhang. Remember, we're going to put a 410. And just always double check, measure it twice. Say 62 rather than 63. 62, so slightly in between. So just double check here. And we go 610. So 610, so it's 5 mil either side. 610 by 410. and I just wrote that on there. Okay, I think it's all backwards, the writing. That's alright. 610, so what we've got to do is add 50 mil on either side, 5 centimetres on either side, so that's another 10 onto that, which takes it up to 690. 690. And the same with the 410, which takes up to 490. So that means we need to cut a bit of foam, 690 by 490. Okay, and before you actually go to cut these bits of foam, what we've got to remember is foam's very expensive, so you've got to be very careful how we cut it so we don't create a lot of waste. We want to create minimum waste. Even the bits of waste we off cut, we keep them, we can glue them together and use for bits of the stool if we start to run out. Also remember, you'll be working off a cutting plan, so I'll be doing a cutting plan schematic where you can follow where the cuts have got to be on the foam, not to waste any foam. So what I'll do is I'll get the foam on the bench. Another thing that we're going to use that I never mentioned is the foam cutter that we did use last week. So I'll just do that in the pocket. Now this is just a bit of soft foam I've got here in the workshop. It's probably years old, not too sure, it's a bit dirty and everything else, but I'll do the job. Once it's covered with all the calico, Dacron, then fabric, you're never going to see how dirty it is. As long as it smells okay, that's the most important thing, it smells okay, because if you put any sort of damp foam onto your job, then the smell's going to come through your fabric. So you've just got to be careful with that, not to store it in a damp place. Okay, so the square. So remember these sizes? I forgot already. So 690. So 690 for my base cut. So we'll get that width out there. So it's 490 by 690. I'm just going to take it out of there and minimise my waste. 490, that's 400. Right, let's do that here. So that's 490 to that edge. Okay, so 490. By 690. Now it's important you get it square, and it's important you get it square because if you don't get it square, then it's not going to sit on top of your stool right. However, the tolerances, you've got quite a bit of tolerance because you can stretch the foam slightly to compensate for the stool not being square. But if you try and make everything as square as possible, it helps massively. So there we have it, a bit of foam, which is, remember, note this down folks, 690 long by 490 in the width. Okay. Get this stuff off the bench. You'll be able to do this on your own bench at the college, and we're all going to have one bench each. Get your foam cutter. Remember, it's supposedly safe, you can touch that, so but always try and keep your hands behind the cutting edge regardless if they say it will cut you or not. Good. and cut away. Don't cut any further than you require. If this is a big sheet of foam, then your next one will be butted up with this going by your cutting span, which I'll have for you if you get to the stage next week. Just remember, folks, all the wee offcuts of foam are always handy. They always can go for stuffing your stool or other jobs if you require them. Okay, so that's us got the 490 by 690. Now the next thing is to create the chamfer. Now we want the chamfered off. It really doesn't really matter where you have it this side or that side, but we'll go for that side, the chamfer. So what we want to do is get your cloth tape, get your marker, and underneath mark off 5 centimetres at the edge, all the way around. Okay, 5 centimetres. Remember, this chamfer is just to stop it from bundling up and bulging. It makes it easier to get around a big curve, i.e. over the top of the rolled edge. So that's the first part of the top bit of the foam. Now the next part is the edge here. Okay, so we know that there is 5 centimetres. What we want to do is we want to measure from the face, we'll call that the face where the measurements is, and we'll measure down 10 mil. Okay, 10 mil. Same as before, just get your ruler along there and strike the edge. I just like to get my finger, measure it like we do in the woodwork, and then just run it right along. That. So it's a centimetre. So that's us got the underneath mat, okay, and we've also got the edge mat. So on this foam cutter, obviously we've got a base plate on here, and that base plate has got wheels on it, which helps you run along the actual bench. But we're doing chamfering, we have to take that base plate off underneath here. Just make sure when you're working on it it's unplugged, folks, because it just makes it that wee bit safer. We've got a wee screw, and when we tighten that up, that locks the base plate on. When we loosen it off, we're able to remove that. So we're just going to loosen that off, take it off, and that's all good to go for the next stage. Okay, you'll need a wee slotted screwdriver for that. So you'll need your steel rule for this, and that's all. Is we've got that line here, and what we're more or less doing is we're going from there all the way through the foam. But to help guide you, if you take the steel rule and just place it probably about half a centimetre to a centimetre just before the line, your line you just created, your fingers in the middle, that means you can watch this line here, and then the guide with the ruler will guide you along that pen line without going on. Okay, and that's your first chamfer done. And the second one, just about half a centimetre before that line. So the next stage would be just a wee dry fit. So what I do is just bring a bit of foam with the chamfer side down onto the top, line it up. Remember, it will start to build, so it just makes that slightly. And what we can do is you can just stretch it into place, and it all looks quite good at that. Okay. And that's what we want to do, is just bring that into place round there like that, so it just gives you a nice smooth round over the top of your edge. So what we're going to do is going to glue this on, and we're going to staple it using the type 71s. We'll go over that in a second. So gluing, we've got to remember the gluing stage part of it. You want to be probably about 8 to 10 inches away from your piece of furniture when you that's good, it's blocked. There you go, goes everywhere. Oh, try and hold it on the bench, because then everything just sticks to it. Put a bit of glue onto where the foam's going to go over to, makes it a little bit better to stick. Easier to connect. Then you've got the foam. Remember your chamfer the edges. I always like to do my edges first. Once you do it, leave it a minute or so, and then bring it into place. What you've got to remember is this will stick almost immediately once you actually bring it onto your piece, so you've got to make sure you get it in place. How I like to do it is I kind of just like to roll it on like that. So I know that's where I'm going to go, and I'm going to press that down. Make sure it's lined up, which it is, and just give it a wee stretch to where I want it to go. And that's it pushed into place. So next part is we're going to actually staple it down. So we're going to actually try and fold it to see if it will stick, which it is nice and perfect, but it will not always hold. So you've just got to back up with a wee staple. So when we're using the staples on this, what we don't do is we don't press right down hard onto the foam, because the staple will just go straight all the way through. So we just put a bit of pressure on it and just push it down, probably every 2 or 3 centimetres, just to hold it in place. So you're not putting a lot of pressure on the foam, so you have to hold it. Well, to the other side. So sometimes you get a wee bit force behind it. If it's nice and tight, then just reduce your spacing between the staples just to give it more hold. You actually probably could have done with cutting the foam a wee bit longer and a wee bit wider. So probably add another centimetre on each of these sizes, which will take it to say 700 by 500. So make the measurements 700 by 500, so the extra centimetres is going to make a bit of difference. And do your edges down the face. And try it out so you can see, folks. foam goes over the line like that, so what you want to do is just staple at the line, and then we can trim off from the line with our knife. We'll come to the corners in a wee second. Once we've got this done. So always have your staples going straight line, not up and down, because what happens, the foam will just cut. So always the straight line where you're pulling the fabric down. So when the tension wants to pull back, that whole staple head is holding that bit of foam on or fabric, depending what you're doing. Okay, so I'm just unravel this. A wee bit tight here. I'm just going to feed it up and over. Needs a wee bit of force to get this done. So the corners, folks, all we need to do with the corners is just pull it down nice and tight, hold, and then just staple at the end here. And then this wee tuft here, what I do is get scissors and just cut that off. Or you can use your knife. Just cut that off. So we're not bulging at these corners. Just repeat that. Just pull it down nice and tight, so it just gives you that nice flow of the foam right over the corner. That's what I'm looking for. And you can just cut that off with the knife. So we can just cut that. Finish off here at two corners. Pull it down nice and tight, get a nice shape, and just staple it along your line. Okay, and that's the foam done. What you can do is you can just slightly take that off. But you know, it's nice and soft. It's not out of line that much, and it'll just compress down when you actually go and do your next part. Alright, so that's that stage. The next stage after this is going to be the Dacron, then calico. Dacron is a polyester fibre. Okay, 4 ounce is what we're going to use. Weights determined how heavy it is, the thickness of the actual foam itself. Oh, sorry, the thickness of the actual fibre itself. So the higher the ounce, the thicker it is. So we use 4, which is quite thin, which gives you a nice softening of the actual seat part. So it's just like the barrier between the foam and your mixed layer. Normally what I would do is I would put Dacron straight on the top of this, then I'd go on my cover. Because we want to do, because we are going to do sewn in diamonds, then we've got to have something to draw on, but we still need the softener, i.e. the actual Dacron. So the process I'm going to go for next stages would be Dacron on top of that, staple that and glue that on place. And we have to glue it in place to stop it moving around. If you don't, what happens is it'll wrinkle up as traffic starts to use the actual seat. Every time it sits, it starts to move it, then it'll split and it'll become wrinkles in your cover, which you want to try and avoid. So if you're getting into a restaurant or anything, or into a seat and you see it wrinkled in the middle, that's the softener, the Dacron, it's moved. It just means it's not been glued in place to stop that movement. So after put the Dacron on, glue, staple it, and I'm going to go in calico. You can get different types of calico. You can get FR calico and just the normal calico that we use. I think the stuff I've got here is FR, which is a wee bit stiffer. FR mean fire retardant. And once we get that put in place, then that's us good to then start with our diamonds. I'd like to draw the diamonds on place onto this, but I always start with a plan first on the board with my sizes before I go ahead drawing it onto here, because the difference between the sizes, finish size and sewing size. Okay, so look forward to the next stage, which will be calico Dacron.